This mic is hot. Yes, it is.
You're hot, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Free Play Florida. Thank you very so much for coming to this panel. My name's Paul Drury. I write for a magazine called Retro Gamer over in England, although you can get it in this country, please do. I'm absolutely delighted to have some guests here. When you think back to the classic arcade era, there are certain game characters that stand out. Pac-Man, a Space Invader. And I would say that one of those is a weird little creature with a long nose called QBert, who was the star of a wildly imaginative game released by Gottlieb in 1982. Today, we have not one, but two people responsible for the birth of that cute little character. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give a warm welcome to Jeff Lee and Warren Davis? Thank you. I'll just tell you how things are going to go. So we've got a few sort of prompt slides to get the boys talking about that time. We've also halfway through got an exclusive video of life at Gottlieb. Then there'll be time for questions from the floor. And finally, we're going to end with a little QBert quiz, which we have some very exclusive and desirable prizes that you can win. And that should hopefully take us to the hour. So, time to start. Okay. I'm going to start here with the Gottlieb logo. So perhaps, Jeff, you could start by telling us, how did you end up working at Gottlieb?
Microphone.
Yes, microphone.
Yes. I a friend named Richard Tracy, who I met him through a mutual friend, a fellow I worked with, and we were both musicians, amateur musicians, and we used to play music together and party together back in the 1970s. Richard worked at a cake design company called Wilton Enterprises. They do mail order or catalog business.
A cake designer.
A cake designer.
Right.
And somehow or other, he started doing freelance work for Gottlieb, which was strictly a pinball company at that time. And I'm sure he designed that logo there you're seeing on the screen. Very talented artist, elegant man with excellent taste. And he promoted a lot of pinball ideas. They just loved his work. Prior to that, Gottlieb, like some of the other companies, used ad posters, which was like an outside agency. They often had favorite illustrators that did work for them many years. Anyway, they hired Richard then to start an art department for pinball. And then a few years into that, they decided to do video games, jump on the bandwagon, and he called me because he knew I was a gamer.
Oh, tell us more. You had some involvement with games just as a player or any...
As a player, board games mostly, Dungeons and Dragons, Avalon Hill strategy games, things like that. And so I was working at a community college, managing a small graphics department, and I had actually been playing some video games at a driving range that was across the street from the college, and including Tim Skelly's, was it Armor Attack? Early tank game
Armor Attack, yes,
that Tim Skelly had done for Cinematronics, I believe. And then within a few months, I was working in the same building with Tim Skelly, who was an independent contractor brought on to produce games for Gottlieb's fledgling video game division.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll come over to Warren now then. So Warren, tell us, how did you end up at Gottlieb? And I'm particularly interested in what they saw in you.
So I had been an electrical engineer at Bell Laboratories in Naperville, Illinois. And I became disillusioned with that job, and I quit in the summer of 1981. And I moved into Chicago, because it was a suburb of Chicago, but I moved into Chicago because my interest was in taking classes at Second City and becoming an improv performer. Right. I kind of had my fill with engineering after being at Bell Labs. So I spent a few months basically unemployed, living off my savings, and maybe taking odd jobs here and there. I was a salesman for Encyclopedia Britannica for 2 days. Actually, I took the job.
Did you sell any?
I did. No, so here's the thing. I took the job because it did not involve selling. I specifically took the job because I didn't want to do sales. And after 2 days, they were like, Warren, you have a very good phone voice. We're going to promote you to sales. And that was it. 2 days later, I was gone. So I kind of kicked around, and by December of that year, I was in Chicago. I was living alone, savings dwindling, taking classes, to learn how to be an improv performer, and looking at the Sunday ads, the want ads, to see what engineering jobs might be available. But strangely enough, on December 27th, 1981, and I remember the date because last year or the year before, I actually went back and found it in the Chicago Tribune archives, the actual ad that I answered. Gottlieb had placed an ad looking for video game programmers.
So I'm intrigued at what, can you remember the interview? What was it about you that impressed them?
Oh, I have no idea. The interview was basically me. I showed up. I ran into this strange guy outside the building who said, "Are you here for an interview?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, yeah, watch out for that Waxman guy. He's a real asshole."
Okay.
I was like, "Okay." That was weird. And then I came in, and I was shown around by a guy named Bill Jacobs, who was a middle manager. But eventually I ended up interviewing with this vice president of engineering, Ron Waxman, who turned out to be the guy that talked to me outside. And
so he was playing mind games with you.
Yeah, exactly. And he sat there with his arms crossed across a conference room table, just kind of glaring at me, and like
He was a very large guy.
A large presence.
Rotund man, gruff voice, always smoked a cigar, and he was like,
Yeah, big black beard.
"Well, what makes you think you can make video games?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I never tried before." "Do you have a computer at home?" "No." "Why not?" "Well, I use them at work. I don't really need one at home." This was 1981. Most people didn't have computers at home. And it kind of went on like that. The interesting thing was I went into this interview strangely with a bit of a chip on my shoulder because I told myself I was not going to go back to engineering. And so here I was, and I'm like, take me or leave me, So, but I was pretty convinced I was not getting this job when I left.
Well, they certainly did take you. And we are here to talk about, very specifically, QBert. So I'm going to stick with Warren and then move to you, Jeff. So let's talk about where did the genesis of QBert begin? Is it in this sort of optical illusion that we're looking on screen here?
Yes, absolutely. Jeff put together this Escher illusion, and he made it for Kan Yamamoto. It was just a screen filled with repeating background. I think it was like 6 background blocks repeated would give you a screen full of the pattern.
Right. The background tiles were 8 by 8, and
Yeah.
If you work it out right, you don't need that many tiles to reproduce that. If it's a continuous, within the pattern.
Right. Very small
very
memory
few characters are needed.
footprint. But at the time, I was still fairly new. I'd been working as a supplemental programmer on another game, a superhero game that wasn't released. And when that was over, it was like, Warren, make a game. That was the way it was. That was my job, right? So one day I saw this Escher pattern on Kan Yamamoto's screen, and it occurred to me that if you were to sort of imagine that or carve that out as a pyramid, then if something landed on the top, it would have one of 2 ways to bounce. Well, that's binary, Programmers like binary. And you could fit like 7 rows, so you could have a completely random path for a ball in 1 byte. And, 8 bits in a byte, and boom. Left, right, whatever. And I'd worked on this previous superhero game, and I programmed rubble falling out of a building, but the rubble did not fall with gravity. It just came out and dropped at a constant rate. So I was like, I kind of like to learn how do I do gravity? How do I make something feel like it has real physics? So I went to Jeff and asked him to give me a ball. You draw me a ball?
At that point, can you take up the ball, quite literally? So I'm interested that, games back then, they didn't tend to be a design document you followed. They evolved. So tell us, how did you then run with said ball?
But there was no game.
Yeah,
we were
yeah,
not
there
talking
was-
about
there
a
was
game.
no document.
We were talking about a ball. That's it at the beginning.
Go on,
Right,
Jeff,
yeah.
tell-
It was just evolution from, I'd been playing with these tiles, copying Escher's tiles since in the 70s, and so it was a natural thing to do. Once I had, these digital tools, so at one point then, the pyramid, the stair-step effect was very obvious. The fact that it can reverse itself so easily is just a wonderful visual thing. I had put together an idea of a shooting game involving a character with a big nose, and that's the one.
Does that bring things coming back? So tell us about the early ideas for the game itself.
So some people may know this. My idea was with snots and boogers. He was shooting mucus out of his nose at these enemies, which you can see some of them are on the different planes. And I explored a lot of options with this. One was where the shooter could actually switch to different planes and being vulnerable then to different enemies. It got very complicated.
Too complicated?
I would say too complicated. And so when Warren took it up with a different intention, different tack, some of it did coalesce again, but he stripped out. Well, that's never in there to strip out. He just
Tell us what you stripped out
Exactly.
for it.
So, I was literally putting in one element at a time.
Right.
So I had balls bouncing down a pyramid. And then that was done. And when that was done, it was like, well, what's next? So the next thing was a player character jumping around the pyramid.
Right. So here's this guy. Okay, let's have him jumping around.
And then the next thing was collision detection. I had to have the balls collide with the player so the player could die. So that was next. And then it was always what's next, what's next, what's next. Now, Jeff had this idea for shooting out of the guy's nose, which I thought, genius idea, fantastic idea. I'm not going to do it. It's too complicated. The physics just didn't work. I didn't know how to make it work. I was like, I want to keep it simple. So, I literally just didn't do that. But as far as the guy, we were just talking about this, but the Ugg and Wrong Way who come in from another direction, this is Jeff's idea. And I'm like, how do I do that? We don't have floating point coprocessor. We can't do like trigonometry. It's all crude math, very fast. We have to count our cycles, our machine cycles. But it was gnawing at me. How am I going to do that? And eventually, I actually somehow, I don't even remember what I did, but I figured out how I can have these guys coming in with a different gravity, and I put it in.
I'm interested that you have to work within limitations. So, Jeff, I'm going to come back to you. One of the big things about QBert is, of course, the character itself. Can you tell us about, within that limited palette, how do you go about creating a memorable character like QBert?
Well, it's because there's not too much to him. You've got basically a ball, a nose, some eyes, and a couple of feet. So, but he fills up. We had our foreground characters were 16 pixels by 16 pixels. So he fits pretty well into that dimension, and he had to be able to move 4 ways. And I think it helped that he was at that x-axis, because that 3/4 view really gives you some potential for modeling with a little bit of shadow underneath, makes him pop out. If he had been straight up and down side by side, he would have seen so much flatter. But this, plus you had the illusion of the cubes, giving this notion.
And where
of
with the
a
nose? I mean, you could
world.
imagine him there without the nose. How important was that massive nose?
I think it makes him very cute.
Well, and again, he was designed to shoot out of it. So, that was literally, I didn't want to make him shoot, but I didn't want to take the nose away.
Right, the nose really serves no function in this game other than, presumably, that's where his swearing sound comes from.
We'll come to that, right? Okay. So what I like about this is, so we've got that kind of pencil design, and then here we're taken from the arcade flyer. We see it all coming into colour, which is what I'm going to pick on here. So either one of you, the big thing about QBert is you needed a goal, and of course the goal is to turn the pyramid one colour. Can you tell me, was that a eureka moment?
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Basically, as I said, I was putting in one element at a time, and I had the balls bouncing. I had QBert. Wasn't named QBert, by the way. It was just a player character jumping around and avoiding the balls. And so basically, we worked in a sort of a big open space, and we didn't have enough development systems for everybody. We had to share them. But so sometimes, like, I might work late at night because that's when I can get on the system. And I was just kind of playing around and jumping around the pyramid and just trying to literally think to myself, well, what's next? What do I got to do next? Now, our vice president of engineering was Ron Waxman, as we talked about, and he would sometimes come into our area and just kind of sit late at night. If we were working late, he'd just sort of sit and watch us. It was a little unnerving. He'd sit behind you. You'd just hear him breathing. Sounded like Darth Vader behind you.
Sometimes he would stand behind you, and like you said, he was very obese, and he would. So picture him doing this, leaning on the table with his cigar and just observing. Yeah.
Always had the cigar, and I remember just the cigar smoke, the breathing, and but he, I'm playing the game and really not kind of conscious of him, and all of a sudden this voice comes from behind me. What if the colors change when he lands on a square? And it was a eureka moment for me. That was like, yeah, because one, easy to program, and two, now you've got a goal. Now there was a purpose and a way to end a round. So, I was like, that's it, and I did it, and just ran with it.
Didn't call for much more artwork either. Didn't call for much more artwork.
I was sticking out because one of those, also on there, of course, the enemies, and I think we all remember Coily, the snake. Again, so Jeff, can you remember the point we went, now, what would look good on this cube? I know. A snake. Was that again a eureka moment?
I'm not sure how Coily generated. And we had different balls dropping down, and I just knew I drew the snake. And
So-
I've got the original.
I thought it was perhaps a spring. Was it that idea?
Yeah, it's like a spring. It just seemed kind of a natural bouncy thing, right? So yeah, snake.
And I gotta say, I let Jeff run with this stuff. I had no interest in what these characters looked like, really. I was just happy to be making a game. I didn't even know I didn't know what this is going to turn into, but I was just, and he's giving me these things that look phenomenal. These characters have all this life.
Yeah, I'm just a doodler.
I'm like, look, you give me whatever you want to give me. Whatever he gave me, I would put in. I didn't,
I'm also intrigued. You mentioned that Ron, your boss, would come and look at stuff. I mean, it is a very original game back then. There wasn't anything particularly like it. These characters are kind of weird. Were you just given carte blanche? Could you do whatever you want? Or was anyone saying no? No. Okay, there you go.
Well,
Oh, the day.
as per the title of Warren's memoir, there was a no, but
Yeah. So, well, yeah. I mean, it was very much of a think tank kind of environment, and I give all the credit to the guys who led the department. It was Howie Rubin and Ron Waxman. Ron being the VP of engineering, Howie was the VP of business development, and Howie was like kind of a crazy, out-of-the-box thinker kind of guy. He would frequently, in the middle of the day, he'd come into our workspace and go, all right, everybody, stop working. We're going to go down to the plant and play some football. And we'd be like, no, we want to work. No, we're playing football. But he was a crazy guy in a lot of ways, and he wanted to name, because honestly, I never named this game while I was developing it. I just
Right.
called it Cubes, or the Cube game.
I'd come up with the swearing balloon just as a joke,
But it was genius, that's the thing.
and so yeah, I kind of pushed that. Howie was all for the idea.
He
Actually.
wanted to call it this, the swearing balloon as the name of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually went so far as to insist on marquees being made up with that.
Which seems to be the more popular marquee. I think a lot of QBert games that get restored wind up.
But I
with
think it's because it's so rare.
repercussions.
I think
Yeah.
it's because it's so rare.
Yeah.
Imagine if there was no name QBert. Imagine that if this was the name of the game. And we would say, well, Howie, how are people going to refer to the game? How are people going to talk about the game?
Did he have an answer to that?
His answer was...
Did he have an explanation of this?
His answer was, if the game is as good as I believe it to be, people will find a way. He was probably right. But we thought, I mean, and not just me, I think all of us thought he was insane.
I know, I kind of like the idea.
Well, eventually he relented, and we had a big meeting, which is where the name came from.
Talk us through, because it is, again, this is a great example of it being organic at Gottlieb. So were you all in that room where you were trying to come up with a name that people could pronounce?
There was a meeting. I don't know if Richard Tracy, my boss, the art director, had organized a meeting, but it was like, we're going to come up with a name for this game, bring suggestions. And we all went into a room.
Can I just say, before this meeting, I actually went around with a pad of paper and polled everybody at Gottlieb. I literally asked everybody, what do you think this game should be called? And I think we all agreed that it should be the name of the character. So we were looking for a name for the character. But I had a pad, pages full of names, people's suggestions, which I've forgotten all except for one. Frank Starshak came up with the name Arnie Aardvark. That was the only, and I don't know why I remember that, but I don't remember any of the other names. I think most of them were pretty bad, and we rejected them. So that's why we had to have the meeting.
Well, there was the name that this evolved from, though, QBert.
Well, that came out of the meeting.
That was in the meeting?
That was in the meeting.
Okay.
That was in the meeting. So my recollection, and feel free to jump in if you remember differently. My recollection is we had this meeting. Dave Thiel was not there. He has said to me, because I thought he was, but he told me he was not there.
David did the sounds.
Yes,
the
David was
sounds.
the third member of our triumvirate.
Right. And he did sounds for all our early efforts.
Right. So, but he was not in this meeting. It was me and Jeff were there. Howie was there. Ron was there. Frank Starshak was a sort of middle
Rich,
manager. Bill Jacobs, a middle manager. Dave Birdie was a marketing guy. Rich Tracy. So, however, 7, 8 of us, whatever, in a room. And I remember we were talking. I had a little bit of an out-of-body experience once during that meeting, because there's like all these grown men talking about what to name this cute little character, and they were taking it so seriously, and I was like, this is weird. And but then eventually, and we were all kind of tired, and somebody went up to the blackboard or the whiteboard, whatever it was, and wrote QBert. I think it was Rich Tracy.
I'm thinking Rich. Yeah.
I think it was Rich Tracy. He wrote QBert. Yeah. And we're all like, okay, why QBert? He goes, I don't know. It's cute. It's a cute name. It's a cute character. But then somebody, and again, I'm not sure who, somebody went up and they erased the H and they put in a C. And we were all, what? And they were like, well, QBert.
Yeah, there's cubes.
So the QBert got
makes
somebody to
complete
think
sense.
of QBert because of the cubes. And we were like, oh, wait a minute. I think we're on to something. And then somebody might have been Jeff. I don't know. Somebody erased the CU and put a Q.
Well, Ron Waxman said, no, you can't call it that because they're going to call it cupboard, like Chicago Cubs,
Okay.
because that's what people from Chicago would
Right,
probably see it
right.
as. So
Cupboard,
then it became the Q.
QBert. And it was a dash. There was originally a dash, and Jeff put in the asterisk.
Yes, and I do regret that.
Why? Why do you get that?
Because I'm a crossword puzzle solver, and QBert has appeared in crosswords over the years, but the fact that it's got that other shape in
Can't
there
be a
probably
crossword clue.
it would be so perfect for so many puzzles because they wouldn't have to have the U in there following the Q.
Couldn't make it to a Scrabble board
And
one
plus,
day.
it was a universal search term back in the days of DOS.
Right.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But that was a lot ahead. I really like how you were creating an image of the atmosphere at Gottlieb. So we've got a little bit of an exclusive here, is that Warren has brought some, it's just 4 minutes long, has brought some video of that. So I'm just going to press play.
Sure.
Will you talk over it so people know what he's going to... It's just 4
By the way,
minutes,
that is Joe Ulowitz. He worked for us for a brief period of time. He's known as the programmer of Nibbler.
Oh.
Right?
I did not know
Subject
that.
of Man versus Snake.
Escaped me.
Why is that not moving? Oh, there we go.
So just to set this up, the background, these are our offices in Northlake, Illinois. We were moved from Bensonville into the main plant. That's another story entirely. But, and that's Lynn Oswald, one of our game programmers, a female programmer, yes, in the 1980s. But what we were doing, this is in the time after Mach 3 came out. So we had Laserdisc technology, and basically Laserdisc meant we had live video or video playing as our background, and we put our computer-generated sprites in front of it. That is Fred Darmstadt, the co-creator of Mach 3. So just for grins, I guess, we plugged a video camera and replaced the flying footage from Mach 3 with live video from the camera. And we just thought, we were just kind of having some fun. So you can see the Mach 3 plane is actually, on the video screen. So everything we're seeing in this video was being displayed with the Mach 3 plane on top of it in the monitor.
And we're getting like the room full of mirrors effect here.
Yeah, right. So right here, there was a plane in front of Joe, and so he was pretending to be a bird. And then we were making jokes like he had a little plane emblem on his shirt. And then we were, putting the plane as an earring on Lynn's ear. So, we were just playing around. It's
like you've invented iToy, but like 30 years before.
Yeah,
super clever.
We're like ridiculous nerds. This is very embarrassing.
And I think Jeff is actually in this video in a moment. Is that right?
There's a brief shot of me.
Yeah, he'll pop up.
Being, of course, camera shy.
I'm running the camera. I do turn it around, and you see the inside of my nose.
There's Terry Dorzaf, actually the artist, the QBert cabinets, some of the other ones. Pinball artist.
There's Jeff.
There's myself.
With the original QBert calendar under him.
Yeah. And there was a brief shot of Chris Krubel, who did Krull, and more shots of Joe.
What was the atmosphere like in the office? It looks fun. Was it fun, or was it more business?
Dave Pfeiffer, he was the hardware designer, right?
Yeah, Dave Pfeiffer did the Laserdisc hardware interface. It was fun. I'd say generally we all pretty much had a good time. That's me. That's my inside of my mouth.
So there would be a plane flying in there, right?
Yeah. It's a shame there's no light because I have a bifurcated uvula, which you would see.
And he won't show it to everyone, will he, Tammy?
Oh, there's Richard Tracy,
Art director.
my friend, my boss.
Yeah. Anyway, but and you can see also our development system at that time was the original IBM PC.
It looks like a Mad Planet's panel there.
Yeah.
Control panel.
Yeah. But the atmosphere was good up until we had a lot of programmers who didn't get games out the door, and then things actually changed, and they kind of cracked the whip. They brought in a middle manager who expected a game to be done in 4 months. Didn't have to be a good game; just had to be a game.
Some product in pipeline.
And
the industry was in trouble at that point.
Yeah. There was a crash. The industry crashed in 1984, and actually Gottlieb eventually shut down. So the last few months were not so much fun, but
Prior to that, it was great.
it was
Like best job ever,
Yeah, I literally thought I would be working there my entire life. I was very naive.
You could, okay, I'm tired of doing this little task. I'm going to go play pinball for an hour.
Yeah,
right. And that was fine.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us that little glimpse into life at Pinball, life at Gottlieb. That's brilliant. We're moving on apace. So I just want to ask what it felt like when the machine actually got out there. So Jeff, can you recall seeing it out there, maybe on field test, perhaps?
In a matter of speaking, it was being tested at a bowling alley. It was one of the usual lairs where we tested games, and I remember going out there, taking my mom and my stepfather out there. Was it? I want to say something Galaxy.
Oh.
Whatever. It was a bowling
sure.
alley.
Yeah.
And they had on test, and there were a lot of people going up and playing it.
Well, first of all, I want to know,
and this was before it had the QBert name. This cabinet had the swear balloon up there, and I made a little notation in my journal that there was, popular. There's always kids playing it. A brief period of time we were there, and so it was a real
Did
kick.
you sort of show to your families? You know, I did this. This is
Yeah,
what.
right, yeah,
Before
sure.
that, was this a bit like, oh,
My
our
son,
boy's done
my
good?
son, the artist, right? Yeah, it was awesome.
What about Warren? I want to ask because it is an unusual game, and I'm going to ask particularly about the joystick because, of course, because of the particular isometric view, the joystick had to be on diagonals.
Yes.
When you were out seeing it early days, Warren, we're all used to it now, but back then, do you think people were looking pretty confused?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was, first of all, at Gottlieb, when I was developing it, there was a lot of resistance to the diagonal joystick. It's a 4-way joystick, but the thing is, at the beginning, we didn't have a cabinet for the game. So the joystick was actually mounted on the underside of an upside-down Tupperware bucket. Right. So it was basically a plastic bucket upside down with the joystick mounted, and it was mounted, you know, in line with the bucket, so I would rotate it, and then people would always rotate it back, and they couldn't figure out where they were always jumping off the pyramid. And I'd have to say, well, so no, you got to do it at a 45-degree angle. And they're like, what? So I did not understand this resistance, because to me, when you look at that play field, you play at a 45-degree angle. It seems utterly natural to me. In the arcades, when it was on field test, I would say sometimes people would have trouble with it. They weren't used to it. But they would overcome it. They would seem to easily overcome it. It didn't seem like it really kept them from playing.
Some people still seem confused. I was at Pinball Expo last month, and this woman, not exactly younger than us, but she said, oh, I loved QBert, but I never understood it. I'm always falling off the pyramid. I was like, really? There's a QBert game in there. Go play it. And just, she came back, oh, thanks for the tip on moving like in an X direction and not off the pyramid. But
Probably not our number one demographic.
no.
The game did remarkably well, and indeed got you on the front cover of Video Games magazine in America. I'm intrigued because this article is fascinating. If you can find it out there on the web, it's really interesting.
QBert has arms in this picture.
That's true. I don't know what's going on there. But what I'm intrigued is that you're interviewed in this, so you know a bit of fame there. But they change your names brilliantly.
Yes.
Jeff, you become designer.
No,
sorry,
I'm
you become designer.
I'm artiste.
Do you see what they did there? Do you see what
Very
they did
clever,
there?
yes.
I'm intrigued why they felt the need to do that. Tell us more why the anonymity was insisted on.
The reason I remember, and this doesn't really make any sense in retrospect, they didn't want the competition to know who we were because they wanted to poach us away, but it was a small industry. People could easily find out. We were always stealing people from other companies, so that didn't make any sense to me. And, you know, I think another thing was, excuse, well, the pinball people don't get any credit, and they'll feel bad. But the fact is,
They felt bad anyway, believe me.
there had been industry publications about previous games where they mentioned the names of the designers, and I had been mentioned, Frank had been mentioned, John Burris, and all these people. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of bullshit. I don't know what was going on.
Well, I mean, for me, yeah, that's the same story I would tell. They did not want other companies knowing who we were because they didn't want them approaching us and trying to steal us away. But the crazy thing about this article is that the article is about QBert and Joust. The focus of the article is the fact that 2 American games were successful when at that time most of the games that were successful were Japanese. Well, when they talk about Joust, they name everybody. They don't give the Williams people had no trouble having all the names in the magazine. So, you know, after this thing came out, we were like, and by the way, we did not know they were going to pick these names. But when we were interviewed, when the guy sat down and talked to us, I don't remember knowing.
I've always wondered whether it is that if you become stars, then you're more likely to ask for more money. Yeah. So while I wondered whether it's like we need to keep these egos in check. Not saying
I don't know, because
is there any truth in that, do you think?
Tim Skelly, who contracted to do 3 games, was a named designer, and part of his contract was his name was going on every machine he produced. They obviously knew who he was. There was articles about him, like in the Chicago Tribune, highlighting his reactor game. There was a little resentment, I think, from other employees that didn't have a deal like that. We had to sneak and in the high score tables, we would get our initials,
right.
our tags in there. That was okay. But Khan went so far as in Mad Planets
Oh, right.
he had his name K-A-N across, but then he had Yamamoto spelled with the next vertically first letter of all the other names there. So
the game did do remarkably well. This slide is to prompt kind of what I'm fascinated, because here we've got FHMC QBert, which stands for Faster, Harder, More Challenging QBert. You were both involved with this. Because we can see that on the screen, and again, your names are on the screen.
Right.
Can you tell me
policy change,
how did this? Yeah, I want to know how did this game come about? You could perhaps argue it's maybe even an early example of a mod if you want to look at it like that. So go and tell us, how did this whole project come about?
Well, QBert being my first game that I did from start to finish was, I didn't know how to tune. I was learning how to tune, and I had to go by my gut, and I had to go by what people told me. And a lot of people kept telling me it was too hard. So I would make it easier, and I would make it easier, and I would make it easier. And when it was out in the arcades, it tested fantastically. And there were people who, found it hard, but then there were people who were playing for hours on one quarter. So it was a very bizarre mix of players out there. And of course, I was freaking out because people playing for hours on one quarter is not good for a game. So I'm thinking...
When you've got a coin-op model.
Yeah, right. So I'm thinking, okay, I want to retune it. And so I keep thinking, all right, I should have left it the way it was, and I've got all these horrible thoughts. So literally, almost as soon as it went out the door, I said, okay, I want to make the next version of QBert, the advanced version, the Super QBert, but I don't want to call it that because that's a lame title. And so everybody, when we were talking about it, was always like, well, what's different about this version of QBert? Well, it's faster, it's harder, it's more challenging. Let's call it that. So that's why I called it Faster, Harder, More Challenging QBert. And in the time between, and it was probably finished a few months after the original went out the door. And I thought, well, let's hold on to it until you feel the time is right, and then let's release it. But they put it out on test way early. They put it out on test like right on the tail of QBert still being new, and it didn't test very well because people were still learning QBert. I just thought, well, hold on to it for a while, but they did not, and I didn't understand that. Anyway, there was a policy change after that article, and all the Williams people were actually mentioned by name, so they would let us put in a credits page.
I'm going to skip ahead a little because we got... Jeff, I'm going to come to you, particularly because you were very responsible for designing the character. Were you surprised with the absolute plethora of QBert spin-offs, whether it's animated TV shows, little toys like this? Was this a surprise, or were you like, yep, I was on a winner there?
Well, it was not surprising. What was kind of surprising was the number of, some of which are still unknown to me, and occasionally someone will show me something. Oh, I got this QBert watch. It's like, oh, I don't remember this. But a lot of things I saw over the years, those little figures there, the craze died pretty quickly, I think, with a lot of this stuff. And when a few years later, I was married, I had small kids, and we would go to like Toys R Us, buy disposable diapers and stuff, and all these little figures were there on discount. So I would buy them all. They were like 80 cents for each. I got a lot of these things, some still in the blister packs.
So if you want to buy an original QBert toy signed by Jeff, see him after the show.
Yeah, I can do that. And the TV show, I remember watching that. It was... If some of you may not know, it was part of an anthology, I think, with Pac-Man and
no, it was Frogger, Donkey Kong,
okay,
Saturday Supercade, it was called.
It was, to me, so horrible. Again, he's got arms.
He's got arms.
They were
QBert
doing this.
cannot have arms. That's
doing
the
this
rule.
Happy Days, West Side Story kind of thing. Yeah. It was just awful.
Warren, I'm going to come to you, is that we've talked about in the past there, but he's still going strong. So this is a little still from Wreck-It Ralph.
If you look at his nose, he's not going strong. He is very flaccid in that picture. Go back to
the days of Viagra, you thought we could have done something.
Go back to the previous slide.
So what's
Look at his
happened?
nose.
Yeah,
Look at
he's
his nose in every way.
Can I say, it happens to all middle-aged men, right?
That's a young, vital QBert. Right.
That's the most insulting thing. Is that they made him
gone
flaccid.
weird. Okay. So let's finish the final question before we open it up to the audience. Are you surprised with the enduring interest in QBert, Warren?
Yes, I'm constantly amazed and surprised. And listen, it's an absolute privilege to have been part of something that has withstood this amount of time. And I don't take it lightly, and I don't take it for granted. It's remarkable. No, I mean, I never in a million years would have thought that this, we'd
Jeff,
be talking about
I
QBert.
feel exactly the same way. It's
What do you put down the enduring interest in that game? What do you think, Jeff?
At this point, it's not the game so much because they like the character. Other than, I think, most the collectors and retro gamers, yeah, they do know the game, but there's a lot of other fans who have never really played it. They know it from the movies or whatever.
Well, we've certainly not forgotten you. So before we go out to the audience for questions, can we have a huge round of applause for Jeff and Warren? Okay, we've got time for about 5 minutes or so of questions. Then we've got a quiz. So is my friend Tony out there somewhere with a microphone? If you could use the traditional method of indicating you want to ask a question by putting your hand up. We'll take some questions for Warren and Jeff. We've got one down in the front here, Tony.
This is based on when you said you field tested at the bowling alley with the kids playing it when it had the original marquee. Did you ask them what was this called? And if they did, what did they say it was called?
Well, that would have probably been up to the Dave Birdie, who was our market research guy. So, no, I did not quiz any of the players.
When I would go out and watch field tests, I was very careful not to talk or influence in any way. I just took it in, and it was actually really helpful. Just watching people play was very, very helpful in tuning the game. We also did focus groups, and I was there at some focus groups where we'd be sitting behind a one-way mirror, and people would come in from the mall, they'd drag them in, and they'd have the QBert set up, and you learned a lot just, again, from watching people.
Thank you. What a good question. If anyone would like to ask another question for Jeff or Warren, please take your hand up. Great, down here.
Yes,
We've
sir.
got two in.
Yeah, I mean, what about Mark III? That was actually very interesting because when I was younger, I always thought that Mark III was done by Milstar, I think it was the name of the company, and now I find out that.
Milestar.
Okay, yes, that's what I was wondering. So it's interesting because I always assumed that was Milstar, and I see you guys talk about Goliath. I mean, same thing with the Three Stooges game that you also worked on. So
It's the same company. No difference other than a name change. Yeah, they.
And it's inexplicable to me why they did that, but they wanted something maybe didn't sound so old-fashioned, ethnic or
Well,
something?
no, I think they wanted to distance themselves from the company, from the Gottlieb family name. So Gottlieb was a family maker of pinball machines for years. Columbia Pictures bought them in 1977. Coca-Cola bought Columbia Pictures in the early 1980s. And I honestly think that Coca-Cola was trying to distance themselves from Gottlieb. I don't even think Coca-Cola wanted to own a pinball company, and that's part of the reason they were shut down in 1984. But they unveiled this name. Literally, it was just a name change. The same exact company. But they unveiled this name that they apparently put a lot of time and money to research, Milestar. And when I saw it,
Richard came up with a new logo and all that stuff.
And I saw it, and the first thing I said at this meeting was, does anybody realize that's rat slime spelled backwards? And
Which is actually the name of my publishing company.
Hey, that's it. Tony, there's a question down the front here.
Oh, sorry.
Is that right, my friend? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you still do improv.
No, I have
doing it now.
I am an actor, and I've been, I'll do acting. I'll be in plays and things like that. I've not gone back. I have gone back to improv at certain points in my life, but I haven't done it for a while. That's a young man's game. Actually, that's not true. There's a lot of great older Second City improvisers in Los Angeles right now.
I've got time for one last question, if anyone wants to get in. Yeah, so last question. Thank you so much.
Was there any kind of dialogue that you would refer to his speech pattern other than just the swearing? Let's put in some swearing here. Was there any kind of terminology you'd use to refer to that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean.
It was random phonemes.
Phonemes. It's absolutely random.
David Thiel had struggled to reproduce speech for previous game, and he talks about it in quite some detail. You can find videos. He does a wonderful lecture about that, and some of those stories are recounted in our memoirs as well. But it is completely random. There's a scientific terminology for the way humans hear random sounds and try to struggle to make them make sense out of them. So that's kind of what's going on, where people think they're hearing deliberate words,
Yeah.
but they're not. Other than where he says bye-bye and I'm turned on.
That's right. That's the only actual speech in the game. I'd like to say two things before we end. And one is, Jeff and I have both, if you like our stories and want to know more, Jeff and I have both written memoirs about our experiences, and they sort of complement each other. They touch on some similar material, but Jeff has incorporated stories from a lot of old Gottlieb employees and talks about all of the old video games. Mine is really focused on my career, which went from Gottlieb to Williams Valley Midway. So I talk about the digitizing systems for Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam, and also talk about Revolution X and Terminator 2 and other games that I worked on. Feel free to come by our booths, leaf through them. You know, my book has tons of photographs and things that are very rare. If you're interested in that, that's great. If not, that's fine too. The other thing, sorry, Paul,
We've not
one
finished,
more thing.
I'm going to plug you, don't worry. Yeah.
One more thing. I'd love it if you guys are fans of the game QBert, please look up the World Video Game Hall of Fame website. It's in Rochester, New York, the Strong Museum. And there's a very short and easy nomination form to get QBert nominated or inducted into their Video Game Hall of Fame. I think it's a shame that it hasn't been nominated yet, and it's really open to the public. So if you're fans of QBert, it's literally like a 2-minute form to fill out of why you think QBert should be in the Hall of Fame. Thank you for that.
Can I just say both the gentlemen have got tables outside in the main hall. They've got loads and loads of stories. You know, we could only touch on a few of them today. QBert was one of those games that had many, many conversions. So we're going to finish with, this should take about 7 minutes. We're going to finish with a quiz. So if you have got a phone, a tablet, a laptop, or a Commodore 64 with a modem, can you direct it to, hang on, I've just got to,
www.menti.com. MENTI.com.
I have to minimize the thing here. Sorry about that. So yeah, thank you. You're doing my job for me. Thank you so much. So yeah, it's up there, www.menti.com. If you've done that right, you should get a screen that looks a little bit like this, and it will ask you to put a code in, which is 355766. Please do that. Can I just say the prizes here include exclusive autographed trading cards by Warren Davis and an autographed book of Jeff's, which again, if you don't win, then they are available outside in the main hall. So, okay, let's find this quickly. There we go. So for each of the questions, there we go. You can change your name if you want. You can't change the avatar. So we've got 8 QBert conversions. So for each of them, there's a choice of 3. The quicker you answer, the more points you get. Good luck. So there you go. It's going to give you a choice of 3. What version of QBert is that? Oh, we fooled some people there. Okay. Yes, it was indeed the Atari 2600. Let's see how we've done here. Oh. Still tight. Okay, still everything to play for. Question number 2. Okay, we've gone a bit more modern here. What version of QBert is that? People playing here. Very good. Well done. Yes, it was the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive if you come where I come from. Okay, has that changed it? Oh, yes.
Ooh,
That's
look at
mixed
that.
things up there.
Ooh.
Okay, well done, Nick. Okay, number 3. Okay, what version of QBert is that? think we fooled some of you there. Yes, that was a home version on the Commodore 64, which, as Mick said, you're well done, Frank, there.
I don't know if anybody cares, but I think I got all of these wrong.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. We tested this yesterday.
I played this
didn't go that
yesterday.
well, did it? Okay, right. Okay. The halfway point then, we're going older. What version is that? Well done. Yes, that's in television. I try to make it American friendly. That's all right. Very tight. Okay, so again, a bit more modern.
I should say it was actually kind of cruel of Paul to make me play this quiz because, you know, I had nothing to do with any of these ports.
Actually, I did. I did the graphics for this
Would
version.
you have got? Oh, there you go. Aha. And so you would have got that one, Jeff. Well done. Did you not follow your baby after it had left home?
Didn't, but in this case, I was hired to do some ethics. So
Did it
kinda
feel
cool.
like going back?
It was better because I had more colors.
There you go. Okay, just a couple left. And again, I tried to be American friendly and it worked. Well done. Very tight, very tight at the top. Okay, this is the penultimate one. Sorry, proper quiz show lingo there. Of course, remember that Sony actually owns the rights to QBert, we've alluded to earlier, so think about it. And as we go into the final, oh, well done, Nick, that might have just pushed. Still pretty
Ooh,
close.
that's a big lead. I don't know. Nick's
It's
ahead.
a cushion. That's a cushion, I'd say. Final question, and I think you should get this one right. Yes, it shows even very humble systems like the Game Boy hosted a version of QBert, an indication of what a timeless and cracking game it was. Let's see, and still is. Let's see who. Oh my God, that was very close, wasn't it? Oh, and yeah.
Oh, Nick, congratulations,
So, just
Nick.
before we finish, can we have both Stout and Nick come up the front to get come up the front and get your prize. Thank you so much for coming. Can I just stress again, please go and talk to Jeff and talk to Warren at their stalls, which is in the main hall. There's books, there's merchandise, there's art, and to be honest, there's them. So talk to them. They are lovely, lovely men. And help get QBert into the Call of Fame.